The woman she is now compared to the woman she was then, which is almost 2 years ago, she's not unrecognizable, but she's so different. Now, anchoring is a technique in NLP that involves associating a specific stimulus, so a word. Walking into the coaching, we knew each other, we were familiar with each other, so we already had established some degree of trust and rapport. It's not going to, the more you work, it doesn't make the work go away. The more you work, the more work comes, right? Because if you're a highly productive, high performer, typically.
Welcome to the Executive Connect podcast. I'm so excited to have Kylie van Luyn with us today to talk about NLP therapy. Now, Kylie, before this podcast today, I was doing some reading on NLP therapy, and I read that 83% of people who use NLP therapy have a reduction in anxiety. Is that true?
Well, I can only speak from my experience going through as a master practitioner, but also my clients, and that sounds accurate to me as far as client experience and my own as well, because it's a really powerful modality for psychotherapists. So, yeah, I think that's why it's gaining a lot of traction and popularity now.
That's unbelievable numbers. So leadership is a big passion of mine, and I've been reading recently on NLP. So from your perspective, can you explain how NLP can be leveraged to enhance leadership skills and decision-making for people that work in high-pressure environments?
Sure. So maybe for your audience, the best thing is for me, we throw acronyms around like NLP. For anybody listening that doesn't know what NLP is, because I have consulting clients and coaching clients all the time saying, what is this NLP? So for those that don't know, it's Neuro Linguistic Programming. That's what NLP stands for. Now, the neuro in NLP refers to your brain, like neurology or neuroscience, because there's parts of neuroscience embedded in NLP practices and techniques. The linguistic is the language that we use or the words that we use. And then the programming is, I'm sure, what we'll talk about shortly, which relates to, I guess, how our brains are wired. I hate to use the word programs, but programs, and how we frame and can reframe through NLP a lot of those beliefs about ourselves and how we perceive the world, ourselves, and also things like challenges. So that's just to let people know what NLP stands for. But NLP itself is actually a psychological approach that involves analyzing strategies used by, I would say, like you said, 83% of people are saying they have a reduction in anxiety. So it's typically used by people who are successful individuals, and then they apply them to reach a personal or a professional goal. So NLP provides insights into forming and changing habits, changing behaviors, and like I was referring to before, reframing the way that we perceive challenges and situations that are critical to goal achievement and success. So, you know, when we get that awareness about us, we know there might be something we need to change, like how we respond to a situation, particularly as leaders. That's where NLP can really help.
I'm fascinated to talk about this subject. So from techniques, you know, I love tips and tricks to do things. And when you're coaching people, what type of techniques do you use with your clients as it pertains to NLP? Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act.
Well, there's a load of them, but when I was I think about this often, and I go back, you know, through my clinical notes, and there's probably 4 or 5 that I typically use the most when it comes to executive or leadership coaching in particular. The first one, and this will make sense when I explain it, is called time-based therapy or timeline therapy. So you can call it either or. And timeline therapy is a technique that we use in NLP to work with a person's internal timeline to release negative emotions that, you know, we all carry around with us and beliefs that we carry around with us all our lives. And we refer to those as limiting beliefs, or they're particularly negative emotions. So timeline therapy can be really helpful in bringing leaders and executives back into his or her past to discover the situations that developed the limiting beliefs that they might be carrying around with them. And those are things that typically trigger unhealthy or unhelpful behaviors, responses to certain situations, how they perceive themselves, and also how they perceive, challenges and the world. So timeline therapy is a big one, because if you don't go back to the root cause, which is typically, it could be something that happened in childhood or adolescence, it's really difficult as a practitioner or a psychotherapist to support somebody to move forward and have sustained behavior change. You have to really take them back and sit with them and work with them. And it takes some time, as you can imagine, to get them to understand that that actually isn't reality. It's something that happened in the past, and they can address that and move forward successfully as a grown adult now. So that would be my most favorite and probably the most powerful that I use. Then there's another technique called anchoring. Now, anchoring is a technique in NLP that involves associating a specific stimulus, so a word, a gesture, or an image, with a particular emotional state or a resourceful state. So anchoring, now I'm thinking about the best way to explain it. Anchoring can be used to help executives or leaders access a state of confidence or a calmness or an emotion or motivation when they need it. So anchoring can be used, if somebody's about to go on stage and do a big keynote or address the board, or if they're going through a particularly challenging time, disruptive time, where they're going through a lot of change management in their organization. So that's another key one that we use for our executives. And then another big one would be reframing. So when I was talking about the definition of NLP earlier, that reframing is really what we need to do after we identify, the origin of certain behaviors and habits in timeline therapy. Then we kind of move forward and we think, okay, so we know why I behave this way, why I have these beliefs or limiting beliefs, why I respond to certain things in a certain way. But now how do we reframe and reprogram it and create what we call new neural pathways in the brain so that we don't continue the same behaviors and same cycles? So reframing involves changing the way that an individual perceives a situation. And it could be a fear of public speaking. I do a lot of work in that space with leaders as well, and looking at it from a different perspective. So replacing things like fear and replacing it with, look at this maybe as an exciting opportunity rather than something to be, death scared of. They're three of probably the key ones that I would use. And then there's others like meta modeling, outcome setting, which is quite self-explanatory. That's just around the importance of setting clear, measurable, specific, SMART goals, essentially, and helping executives and leaders really clarify their goals and develop a plan to achieve them through things like visualizing and attaching feelings and anchoring feelings to their ideal self or their ideal state.
Those are great examples of ways to use NLP therapy. I know I love biographies. I'm a big biography reader. And so I always like to learn about success stories through, people in the past or people that have businesses. So do you have any success stories that you can share with us about some of the executives that you have mentored and maybe some of the outcomes from some of those coaching sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one that springs to mind is one of my clients back in Australia. She was new to her executive role. Her CEO said, look, she was very keen for some leadership coaching. And it's really funny when people engage you as a leadership coach, because typically very quickly within the first, I would say 40 to 45 minutes, you go into a mindset coach, because you can't coach successfully or develop effective leaders and successful leaders without first getting the mindset right. And so for me, with her, she was a new executive. She was already very much walking into the coaching. We knew each other, we were familiar with each other. So we already had established some degree of trust and rapport. But she was very open-minded. So I would say she was already in what we call the growth mindset. She wasn't shut off to the coaching experience, which was wonderful. But very quickly, not only was she aware of it, but I picked up on the fact that she's very much operating, or she doesn't now, there's still twinges of it, very much operating as a perfectionist. She ran perfectionism like a pro, this lady. And what she was doing is, as we know with perfectionists, they tend to burn themselves out because they're usually, perfectionism goes with people pleasing hand in hand. And she was not only, trying to, I guess, not trying to be a perfectionist, that was her natural behavior and tendency, but she was really trying to prove her worth. So there was a whole bunch of things at play. And so very quickly I said to her, where does this come from? Like, we're all who we are because of something, and it's usually childhood, upbringing, cultural beliefs and backgrounds. And she said to me, we did some timeline therapy together over a number of weeks. And what I found, and through lots of tears and emotion, was that she had a very controlling childhood in a very religious family upbringing. She was only accepted if she was a straight A student. Anything but an A was, you're not good enough. Why don't you try harder? So really difficult parental relationships as well. And so all her life she had lived trying to not only prove her worth, I think, to her parents, but then everyone around her subsequently as she grew up. But also she had that perfectionism trait, and that it wasn't just that she was a hard worker, she was going like above and beyond to the point where her own health and well-being would suffer. And before I met her, her previous role, she'd been an attorney or a lawyer. So this was a new industry, a new role. And after we did that timeline therapy, we did some meta modeling together. We did a whole bunch of outcome setting and a lot of reframing. What I started to understand was not only where that perfectionism and people pleasing originated from, but also what were the limiting beliefs that she was carrying along with that. She wasn't aware of her limiting beliefs until we pointed it out, because limiting beliefs, typically we carry them around, and that is to us our reality. That's the world we live in. That's the world we've created. And by the age of 30, who we are is typically, not only our values are established, but our persona and our personality is established. So it's really difficult after the age of 30 to identify that you need to pull it all apart and start again. So through all of those sessions, she realized why she approached life and her work the way that she does, with that perfectionism. She also realized that her inner critic is her own worst critic, and that, I guess, the limiting belief she had that she wasn't good enough, it just wasn't reality. So she had a lot of feelings about, her boss and her team, that they didn't feel she was worthy of the new role, but also that she wasn't good enough at what she was doing to be a leader. And so what she came to realize, and hopefully helped her along the way, was that inner critic was not reality. She was doing a phenomenal job. Her boss was actually very, very happy with the job she was doing, and it helped her manage up more effectively, because she knew that she needed more feedback from her boss at the time to, I guess, continue to develop that confidence and I guess nurture herself as a new executive. So she felt more confident. She really stepped into her greatness, and the woman she is now compared to the woman she was then, which is almost 2 years ago, she's not unrecognizable, but she's so different. She's just got this strength of character, and she's able to handle the pressure in that high pressure environment much better. She's also able, which is really important for leaders and executives, to establish those healthy boundaries. She wasn't able to do that before because she didn't have the tools and the knowledge of, that people pleasing side of her and that perfectionism.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I think about, as you were talking, I was thinking about just how difficult being a leader is in the world today, and how, you have so many things besides that. A lot of people are now working remote. There's just a lot of new, challenges these days. So from your perspective as a leader, what are some of the top qualities that leaders today should possess? Are you someone with a demanding job, but tired of the 9-to-5 grind? What if you could build a profitable side hustle without sacrificing your full-time career? Our new partner, Book Profits, can show you how to turn your limited free time into a thriving online business. Learn how to find, sell, and profit from used books, all on your schedule from the comfort of your own home. Not crazy tech skills needed and no major upfront investment, just simple strategies that fit into your busy lifestyle. Visit the URL on the screen for a free training today and learn more.
I've been asked this a lot, and I always say, and this is my opinion, but I always say without really strong emotional intelligence skills, you cannot be an effective or successful leader. Because emotional intelligence, for me, I picture it, I'm very visual, but I picture it as being the very heart, the very center of what leaders need in order to do what they need to do and engage with their teams in a particular way to be really effective and successful, not just as individuals, but how they then take their team on the journey to success, or how they take their team on the journey through change effectively. So I always say emotional intelligence skills, they can't be underestimated. I think and the other reason I say that is that if you, and I'm sure you've encountered, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have encountered leaders who really lack emotional intelligence skills. Those leaders find it so difficult, and we come across this in our coaching practice all the time. They wonder why they can't connect with their team members, why they can't build trust and rapport, why people don't naturally gravitate to following them as a leader, or they don't get buy-in and credibility. But they also are those leaders that are just so unaware of their own behaviors. They actually, a lot of them that I meet, they're not aware that they need development in this area because they're not aware of their own behaviors, areas of improvement, and skills that they need to build. So it's really interesting when we have to sit down and say, you're lacking a bit of emotional intelligence here. Let's work on that and see what improves, and things do. They improve out of sight. They also are the leaders that those that lack emotional intelligence skills really struggle to build inclusive, positive, and psychologically safe workplaces. And without that, you're not going to succeed as a leader, but also as a team and as an organization. So that would be my first one, emotional intelligence for sure. The other things that I see and don't see in leaders are things like that visionary side of things. So as a leader, particularly the higher up the leadership chain that you go, your team, everybody wants to follow the leader. Everybody wants to feel the leader knows where we're going. They don't know where we're going. We're staff. We want to be directed, and we want to feel that trust and confidence in our leader that they know where they're going and that they know the why behind it. So not being a visionary leader and then not having the communication skills to communicate to your team what the vision is and why they essentially need to follow you on this journey, that creates things like, skepticism and lack of trust, and it does impact things like culture and psychological safety. So I'd say that's another key one as well, is being a visionary or having a very clear vision, and then also having the communication skills to execute the vision very clearly to people, especially during times of disruption and change. And then the other few that I would say is knowing how to empower your team. And it comes back to emotional intelligence, but I've had leaders say, we hear the word empowerment all the time, but how do I do that? Like, what do I need to do? And I would say empowerment is a big one. Like the how behind, empowering your team and showing them that you trust them and giving them ownership over their roles and trusting them to make decisions and fail and try new things. So they would be some of the key ones. Resilience would be another one as well.
Absolutely. I agree with all those. And I'm thinking change as well. Like, we're in such a world that is changing and adapting and evolving. And I think a lot of times in roles, not being comfortable with change makes it really hard to navigate, whether you're in a small company or a big company. I think that's another really important one, is change. I was thinking about, mindset, your values, your purpose. How does all of that contribute to people's personal and professional lives? Like, how do you align all of those to make sure you're living really your best life?
I'll use me as an example for this one because before I started the firm almost 3 years ago, I thought I knew my core values and I thought I was very clear on my purpose. I was in the nonprofit sector in Australia for 15 years as an executive, and I got to the point where I hated who I was at work, apart from the psychological safety that was really lacking in two workplaces in particular, and the overworked and the workload and the burnout. Putting that aside, what I realized is until I went through all of my NLP training and psychotherapy training, I'd never actually sat down and identified and deeply understood my own core values. And without doing that, you can't identify or discover your purpose. So it's all interlinked, right? So for me, it was sitting down and doing this exercise as part of my training, which took, I'd say, 4 hours. And what came out of it was the core values that I thought I knew were not my core values at all. And my core values ended up being freedom, connection, and purpose. And when I knew those three top core values, I thought, oh, that makes complete sense, because freedom was the number one thing, and connectedness that I'd been seeking but completely lacking in my previous roles as an executive, which was causing that unhappiness and those feelings of dissatisfaction and lack of fulfillment. And so then what I would say is then sit down and think, okay, I need to identify my purpose because I feel not completely fulfilled, or I feel like I'm not on the right track with my career. And the way that I typically do that with people is say to them, well, what are your strengths? So what are the things that you do really well, based on what you know of yourself, but also based on what the feedback you might have received from others. The other thing is we spend so much time at work, you have to enjoy what you do most of the time. We can't hate our job and just turn up for a paycheck, because you'll make yourself physically and psychologically ill at some point. And so I say to people, what's the thing or things, and if you've got an example of, a time in your career or a time in a particular job when you've had those butterflies in your tummy, when you felt like that thing you did really set your soul on fire. And I get people to answer that question. What is it, or what are the things that sets your soul on fire? What excites you? It could be working with animals. It could be, for me, I have to be in the service of others. I have to help organizations or help individuals or whatever it might be, particularly those that are facing disadvantage. But what is that thing that sets your soul on fire? And I always say to people, you need to do more of that. That's your purpose, essentially. And then when the mindset comes in is adopting, you can't be successful. And I always dare people or challenge people to think of an extremely successful person that they know, or a celebrity that's a really negative, closed off person. And the answer usually is, well, I can't think of one. And I'm like, that's because they don't exist. Typically, very successful people or very successful and effective leaders, they adopt a growth mindset. And what that means is that they are open to opportunities. They see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. They've got a real willingness to tackle challenges with a positive mindset. So they're real go-getters typically. But they also, they never stop learning. They're always those people reading, and, what you were saying about yourself, you were looking at NLP. They're people that are always hungry to know more and keen to develop themselves personally and professionally. So those are, I guess, the three things: the values, purpose, and mindset, and where they all fit together.
Yeah, I want to focus in on something you said. Challenges, they happen to all of us. I don't think any of us, no matter our age, are going to get through life without a lot of challenges. And I think you explained it really well, that challenges are opportunities. It's how you look at things that happen to you, whether you feel attacked or you feel oh, this happened and now I'm going to make this other decision. So I love that you said that, a growth mindset, and look at things that happen as opportunities. And you might not know today, but just exploring those opportunities are really key. And I think that is exactly spot on with having a growth mindset. And it makes you more positive, right? And you're not blaming other people, or you're just saying, hey, this thing happened. And, now that I'm aware, you have more information to make other decisions. So that is such a good piece of advice. Pivoting a little bit and kind of talking about maybe not the negative side of things, but what are some challenges you think that, we talked about positive qualities that leaders have today. Now, what do you think some of the challenges leaders are going to have today leading these days? And how can they overcome them? So what are the challenges and what can they do to overcome them?
Oh, some of the challenges I think are time. That was my biggest challenge, is time. But because, and a lot of these are interlinked, right? Because I was lacking time, I was working 16-hour days during COVID. And I couldn't get on top of things. And my husband said, it's not going to, the more you work, it doesn't make the work go away. The more you work, the more work comes, right? Because if you're highly productive, high performer, typically we see that those people get loaded with more and more and more work because they're competent. So I think a lot of leaders that I work with and that I hear from say, I just don't have the time. I know I'm not the leader I should be. I'm not giving as much of myself to my team, so they have shame and guilt. And I'm like, those feelings are not going to be, or those emotions that you're carrying around, they're not going to be useful for you as far as carrying that around. But I think time and lack of bandwidth to be able to properly engage with their team, but also for them to go off and do their own professional development and their own time to reflect on what's working for me as a leader. I used to take block time out in my diary for reflective practice. I still do it now and think, what's working or what's worked this week? A lot of leaders sort of almost snort and laugh at me and go, Kylie, I barely have time to get through my inbox, and that's me sitting in front of the computer, and that's not even me engaging with my team or working on strategy or, the bigger picture stuff that I should be as an executive. So definitely time would be a restraint and a challenge. The other thing would be the burnout that we're seeing. And a lot of that, when we talk about mindset, that a lot of, what I talk to my executive clients about, my coaching clients, is when they're saying, I'm so overwhelmed, and you can feel the anxiety coming through the Zoom or in the face-to-face meeting often. And I just say to them, just take a deep breath and remember there's two things here. One, you still have even when everything feels out of your control and chaotic and hectic, you still have control over how you choose to show up every day and the choices you get. You get to choose the behaviors and how you respond to what's going on in the workplace. You still get to choose that. And so think carefully about the choices you're making. And the reason we do that as coaches is because we want to come from a place of empowerment. So people who feel completely unhinged feel like, hold on, I still have control over something. The other thing that I typically say is think about what's within your control and what's sitting outside of your control. As hard as it is that leaders, we typically try and fix and solve all the problems of the world in the workplace, you have to funnel your energy, your time and your mindset to only the things that are within your control. So forget the workplace politics, forget whatever else is going on around you. You can only focus on what's within your control. And again, that's just coming from a place of empowerment and trying to give them a little bit of calm within the chaos. But some of the other challenges that we typically see is a lack of skills with leaders. We see people have been in organizations or companies for a long time, and they've been subject matter experts or very good technically, and that's the reason they're promoted into supervisory or managerial positions, but they don't necessarily have the people skills. And, we get engaged by their bosses or by them directly saying, I'm having a real trouble leading this team of people. And then very quickly what we find is that they're lacking either the leadership skills, but a lot of that is linked to, emotional intelligence and their own awareness about their behaviours and their areas for improvement. So there's some of the others. But I think, gosh, there's so many. I mean, AI, technology disruptions, skills and workforce shortages globally. We do a lot of work in that space. And so we see people saying, I can't attract and retain staff. So my culture, I'm finding it hard to build the culture, but then nurture and sustain or maintain a positive culture because it's so difficult to attract the right people and then retain the talent. And so we do a lot of work. Again, it all comes back to emotional intelligence and how the leader shows up, because you can fix all of those things if you've got really strong leaders.
Yeah, and I think, the time piece is so true. We're such a world and culture that expects everything today, right now. It should all be done. Here's your task. Why isn't it done? Just 2 points, I think, when I think about time, all of us, everybody is busy with things that they fill their day with. And really managing the day, it shifts so much, right? We start the day with these 10 tasks, and then you get into your meetings, and then you have a 911 at your work, and your 10 tasks that you were planning on getting done today, they might shift to tomorrow. And that is part of like you mentioned, being a leader and making decisions. And one other piece kind of to that is when things are really stressful and you're really stressed out, standing up and walking away for a minute helps you regroup your thoughts, regroup yourself, and resetting. So whether that's, getting a drink of water or using the restroom or just getting up and resetting and stretching or moving your body, and then, sitting back down and really focusing on what you need to solve today instead of looking at the list. Okay, here's my list of 10. I got to get all 10 things done. And depending on the 10, it could be a ton of pressure for you to get done. One by one, what's the most important thing to get done? And then you have 9 and look at those 9, what's top thing? And then if you only get 3, the other 7 move to the next day. Don't take that burden with you home, or just moving on, right? I know that as an executive and leader, very few days have I ever gotten all my to-dos done in a day, and they've moved. I've had to-dos sometimes that have been on my list for a month or more. And a lot of times people will come back and say, hey, what about that one thing? And I'll say, well, these other things took priority. Would you now like me to focus on this thing? And so I think it's also having dialogue with your leaders as well. So if they're expecting these 10 tasks and you think those 10 tasks are going to take a month, it's really up to you to communicate that to your leaders. And I think the more that we have that, like you said, dialogue and communication, the less stress we're going to have on ourselves and pressure, and the more clarity we're going to have in the workplace.
Absolutely. I was giggling, Melissa, because when you said, you had tasks that moved to the next day, I had one thing. It would have been 3.5 years ago. And I knew that I was procrastinating. It wasn't important and it wasn't urgent. So I was like, well, it can go on the back burner. And it wasn't like, it didn't sit in my fire me up zone. But it was just a task I had to get done. And my team said to me after 2 weeks, they said at a team meeting, we've noticed you keep moving that thing on your diary. Because I used to put all my tasks, unless they were confidential things. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. It's not urgent, it's not important. And I used to teach them, the Covey model or whatever they call that matrix. If it's not urgent, it's not important, it can wait. But also I think people appreciate your team or your leaders. They appreciate you being transparent. I'm not going to get this done today. And I think once you communicate and establish those boundaries and expectations, like you said, you just feel like you can take a sigh of relief going, okay, they're not expecting all of this from me this week.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the burden we put on ourselves, right? It's maybe not your manager or your leaders that are putting all these things on you. It's you also putting the burden on you and not communicating when things are out of balance. And that word balance, I've struggled with that word for many years. I don't know if I believe in the word balance. I think there's some days, my personal life is balanced, and there's some days it's unbalanced. It's kind of that scale that tips one way and the other way. But I think communication is a two-way street, and it takes time and progress. It doesn't just happen when you first meet someone. You got to understand, we all have different ways we learn, different ways we communicate. And I think, to your point, time is going to be a really important thing as we move quicker and faster, and people want things sooner than later. So it's going to be really key to manage that with your peers and your leaders as you develop and grow within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, I was just thinking, like, safety. A lot of times I hear from people that they don't feel safe at their job, or they're getting a lot of criticism. So, in today's world, why do you think why is it so important for critical feedback in today's work environment, giving positive or just dialogue with the people that you report to?
Because it goes back to psychological safety. So if you're not having, and I always say to leaders, are you having regular communication? And they go, yeah, we have a team meeting. Are you having regular one-on-one? Are you creating regular one-on-one opportunities for your team? Because not everybody, and again, it goes back, and I talk about psychological safety a lot, but not everybody, because of the diversity of those in our workplaces, feels comfortable saying in a team open environment, hey, I've got a sick child, or hey, I'm not going to get to this task today, or hey, I've got something happening in my personal life that I know is going to or is impacting my performance at work, right? So I always ask leaders that one question when they say, my team's not working, it's not functioning right. I say, okay, let's put the responsibility and ownership and accountability back onto the leader just for a minute. Are you creating opportunities for your teams to have regular team and one-on-one conversations with you? A lot of leaders say, well, they know they can come to me. I'm like, do they? Have you told them that? But if it's not in the diary, people typically, unless they're friendly or friends with the boss, they won't knock on the door and say, I need to talk to you about something. And it could be related to the leader or their leadership style. It could be something that they've got concerns about, or even a grievance before it turns into a formal grievance. Sorry. So that's one of the first things I say is, are you giving your teams creating those opportunities? The second thing is, if we're not communicating regularly or frequently, and we're not providing open, honest, transparent feedback, whether it be positive feedback or constructive feedback, they're both the same, but if there's, issues around performance, a lot of leaders shy away from having those conversations because it's uncomfortable. And I always say to them, but if this continues and then you end up with a performance management issue, you haven't followed due process. You need to give the person an opportunity to know where their shortfalls are or their areas of improvement, how you're going to support them as their leader, what they need to do as a team member or a staff member, training, whatever that might look like. And then you need to come together and you need to explain what your expectations are as far as that improvement timeline, so that they can be fully functional and doing their job. So often leaders shy away from what they call difficult conversations. And it comes back to what you were saying before, Melissa. It's difficult because that's how you're perceiving it. And so you're projecting your opinion on maybe how you feel about a scenario onto the person that doesn't even know there's a problem yet. So if leaders can get into this normal, natural groove and routine of structuring one-on-ones, structuring regular team calls or team meetings, talking about the vision, linking back what the bigger picture and vision and goals are to every single person's individual role, they'll see that people buy into them as a leader, buy into their vision and mission, be very clear on what their roles are and what the performance expectations are, and they will, go on that journey. It's typically when people have got no idea what's expected of them and they're confused that they either, just turn up and get a paycheck and they're not particularly productive. Morale starts to suffer and productivity starts to suffer. And then it's only really the people that are very intrinsically motivated that are the ones performing and producing.
Yeah, and I think about I've been managing people for 20 years, so I've seen a good amount of these kind of some of this dialogue. So taking it a little step further, so absolutely one-on-ones, super important. And sometimes on one-on-ones, you'll, hit one of your direct reports with a question and they might not feel comfortable answering you. And you might have heard from somebody else in the organization and you decide to ask the employee and they might not feel comfortable sharing things with you. And so I think it's a place where you have to continually build rapport. And then at some point, if they're just, if you ask them, how's everything going? And from other people that it's not going well and that they're very stressed out, you might have to hit it head on and just ask them questions like, do you feel like you have too much work? Are you overwhelmed with this project? And you might have to actually hit it direct to that person, because there may be times where you're like, I'm having my one-on-ones and, everybody's telling me that things are fine, but their face tells me that things are not fine. And so I think, when managing people, sometimes people don't feel comfortable sharing with you directly for whatever reason. So that's, you need to spend more time building rapport and relationship with those people. And then if you do, and they are not answering you, then sometimes you might just have to hit it head on. And if they say everything's great, then that just also might be their personality and how they communicate within the organization. But I think there's so many great pieces that we've discussed and so many great ideas. I'm trying to think. We covered so much ground. I want to just give you the opportunity in closing. Any other things we might have missed or top 3 takeaways for executives and leaders?
For those of you that might be feeling, hear that sigh, that overwhelm that we see a lot of leaders, like I used to say leadership can be a really lonely place. And one of my team members once during COVID said, we know the hours you're putting in and you're looking after all of us, but who's looking after you? And I thought, what a beautiful question. And so if there's no one looking after the leader, you really have to take that responsibility on yourself. So what I can see, because a lot of my clients are burnt out when they get to me, or they have been bullied or harassed or experienced workplaces that aren't psychologically safe, really you can't get your health back. You need to nurture that now. You need to make time for your health and your self-care now, or you'll need to make time for illness later, is what I say. So take care of yourself. Try and recognize some of those things that might be happening. But yeah, when we think about mindset and overwhelm, I always say magic happens in calm, not chaos. So when you're running around crazy, hectic, and we all have those days, just take a moment when you recognize that you're operating in that domain and think, this isn't serving me. It's not going to get me the outcomes I need. It's certainly not going to serve my team. Take a deep breath or go and meditate for 10 minutes if you need to. Like you said, step away from the thing. And just remember that magic happens in calm, not chaos. So just take it down a notch and, find your center and then you can get on with it. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think you made me think of something I always used to tell myself, Kylie. I'm like, how you live your life in your 20s, 30s, and 40s is how you will enjoy your 50s, 60s, and beyond. And so if you're, not eating right, not sleeping, drinking too much alcohol, harming your body, it's going to be really hard to unwind that as we get older. So you're spot on with really paying attention to your health. And if you're one of those people that can't do that, sometimes scheduling it, just scheduling it. And if you schedule it and it changes, paying for it, like paying for a coach or paying for a massage or paying for things up front, you're more likely to go to it if it's scheduled and paid versus, if it's just kind of casually, I'm going to go to the gym in the mornings and the mornings happen and you make excuses why you can't do it. So I love that you mentioned that. Thank you so much, Kylie, for being here. I could talk to you forever and ever on this subject. I love it and all your great insights. Thank you so much. That's the Executive Connect podcast.